Buckingham Palace has seen scandal, whispers, and rumors, but nothing quite like this. When a trusted palace staffer broke down in tears, insiders say it wasn't the pressures of royal protocol. It was Meghan Markle. What really happened behind those gilded gates? Was it bullying or a brutal smear campaign? Allegations have surfaced, emotions have exploded, and now even the Queen's loyal aides are speaking out. With investigations buried and no official report released, we're left asking, what is the palace hiding? The silence is deafening. And what Meghan did might change how we see her. Forever. Stay tuned. The whisper that started it all. It all began with a whisper, one that traveled fast through the golden halls of Buckingham Palace. A rumor, small at first, but one that quickly caught fire. Staffers were murmuring about an incident involving Meghan Markle, something that had left one assistant in tears and the royal household in shock. What exactly happened? That's where the confusion starts. According to palace insiders, it began when Meghan reportedly confronted a staffer over a missed detail during a high-pressure event. One witness described it as a sharp exchange, but others claimed it was something much more severe. She belittled her in front of others, a source claimed, and the staffer was devastated. While Meghan's defenders say she was simply being direct, others saw it as a line crossed. By the next morning, palace aides were buzzing. The story had already reached Prince Charles, and senior staff began documenting what they called patterned behavior. The whispers became formal notes, the notes became reports. And before anyone could blink, the palace HR team was quietly looped in. But here's the catch. None of this made it to the press. Not yet. Buckingham Palace is, after all, skilled at keeping its skeletons behind gilded doors. Still, this incident sparked something bigger. A quiet investigation, a slow unraveling, and a growing rift between Meghan and the staff who once served her. She wasn't screaming, one palace insider said, but her words did the damage. What started as a minor incident was about to snowball. And in the next chapter of this royal saga, we'll explore exactly how these whispers turned into formal accusations and why some say the real target wasn't the staff, but Meghan herself. From dispute to documentation. As weeks passed, the incident was no longer just a rumor, it was paperwork. Staff had started documenting every uncomfortable encounter. These weren't isolated moments, they were labeled as ongoing issues. Aides began speaking in hushed tones, trading stories, and some even considered resigning. Jason Knauf, the Sussex's then communications secretary, made a move that would change everything. In late 2018, he sent an internal email. In it, he raised formal concerns about Meghan's treatment of staff. Knauf's message alleged that two members of the team had been driven out by what he described as her unacceptable behavior. This wasn't just workplace gossip anymore. It was official, and Knauf, a key figure close to both Meghan and Harry, had crossed the line from silent witness to whistleblower. He flagged Meghan's approach as problematic, not just for morale, but for the palace's image. It was a move that shook the inner circle. The palace's human resources department found itself in unfamiliar territory. Royals aren't employees. They don't have managers. So how do you investigate a duchess? This was uncharted ground. An unnamed palace official said, "We weren't prepared for this. We didn't know how to proceed." "The palace is like a machine," said one insider. But no one had the manual for this. What followed was a decision that would leave the public and the press divided. The palace launched an internal review, but decided not to release the findings. Why? We'll explore that next, along with what some believe was a quiet royal cover-up. A royal review buried in silence. The public learned about the investigation in early 2021, just days before Meghan and Harry's infamous interview with Oprah. The timing, some argued, wasn't a coincidence. The palace, perhaps, was preparing for fallout. But when the review concluded in 2022, Buckingham Palace made a stunning announcement. They would not publish the results. For a public used to accountability, this was baffling. Transparency, after all, was promised. Yet suddenly, the palace claimed it wanted to protect confidentiality, even though multiple staffers had spoken to journalists by then. Critics immediately labeled it a cover-up. Royal watchers and reporters speculated, was Meghan cleared, or was the palace trying to avoid further damage? According to one staff member who spoke off the record, if it exonerated her, they'd have released it. That silence? That tells you everything. The palace offered a vague promise. HR procedures had been updated to ensure better staff support. But that wasn't enough for many former aides. One told The Times, "We told the truth. We wanted fairness. And in the end, we got swept under the rug." The Queen always said, "Never complain, never explain, but some things deserve explanation." So, what's next in this tangled royal tale? As Meghan tried to move on in California, many wondered, was she truly the bully, or a victim of palace politics? The next point pulls back the curtain on the emotional toll and public backlash that followed. The palace walls. Whispered first. It didn't start with Meghan's interviews or her documentaries. Long before Oprah or Netflix, the rumblings began within the palace walls themselves. Staffers, aides, and insiders started to talk, but only in hushed tones. The whispers revolved around Meghan's demanding nature and strict expectations. For a royal newcomer, that alone would have caused friction, but the scale of her requests allegedly overwhelmed staff. According to Valentine Lowe, royal correspondent for The Times, Meghan's communications secretary, Jason Nauf, sent an internal email stating 2 staffers had been driven out due to her treatment. That claim alone sent shockwaves through the royal machinery. The palace has long maintained an old-school, stiff upper lip approach to internal disputes. But even they couldn't ignore this one. HR procedures weren't even designed to deal with royal members as employees. As Lowe pointed out, the royal family doesn't fit into normal workplace protocol. They didn't know how to deal with it when it was supposedly a member of the royal family who's bullying staff. It was a rare moment where palace protocol failed to protect its own staff. Things got worse behind closed doors. Sources revealed that Samantha Cohen, Meghan and Harry's private secretary, and a royal veteran, was allegedly placed under enormous pressure. One staffer said she was screamed at multiple times. For Cohen, who had worked under both the Queen and Prince Charles without incident, this was unlike anything she'd seen before. Her resignation shocked the palace, and it became impossible to deny that something wasn't right. This wasn't just tabloid drama. It was about workplace safety, emotional well-being, and the personal toll of royal life. One aide told Lowe, Meghan was a narcissistic sociopath, and the impact she had was devastating. While such labels may sound harsh, they reflect the emotional depth of what staff felt they endured. But what happens when those closest to you can't speak freely? When their voices are muffled by NDAs, traditions, and palace silence? Well, that's where things take a very strange turn. A silenced investigation. Once the allegations became public in 2021, Buckingham Palace did what it rarely does. It acknowledged the issue. They announced a formal investigation into the bullying claims made against Meghan Markle. That announcement alone showed just how serious the matter had become. For an institution that avoids public scandal like the plague, this was massive. The Queen authorized a probe into her own grandson's wife. But here's the twist. The results of that investigation were never released. That's right. After months of reviewing evidence, interviewing staff, and compiling internal testimonies, the palace quietly shut the doors. They released a vague statement. Lessons have been learned. No names, no details, no verdict. To many, it looked like the palace had chosen to bury the truth. Why would they do that? Some insiders suggest it was to avoid further conflict with Harry and Meghan, who were already estranged. As one royal source put it, they decided it was better to take a few bad headlines than to ignite another public war with the Sussexes. Instead of answers, we were left with a mystery. What did they uncover that was too sensitive to share? This silence only made things worse. Meghan's critics felt vindicated, saying the findings were too damning to be revealed. Her supporters, on the other hand, believed the investigation was biased from the start and covered up to avoid revealing how poorly the palace had handled things. As Trisha Goddard pointed out, if this were about a white duchess, would the same scrutiny have occurred? With no closure and no transparency, the royal family seemed to confirm what many feared, that when it comes to insiders versus outsiders, the crown protects its own first. But just when you thought the palace had said all it would, a new set of voices emerged, former staffers who were done staying silent. And what they shared would turn the royal narrative upside down. Staffers break. Their silence. In the aftermath of the Oprah interview and the ongoing PR storm, palace aides who had remained quiet for years decided to speak up. They went directly to journalist Valentine Lowe and revealed what they had endured while working under Meghan Markle. And their testimonies weren't vague. They were vivid, emotional, and painful. One former aide claimed a colleague had been completely destroyed by the Duchess's behavior. Another spoke about emotional trauma and repeated humiliation that led several people to resign. These weren't anonymous gossip pieces, they were documented stories, shared with a journalist known for credibility and caution. People were in tears, Lowe reported. It was unlike anything they had seen in decades at the palace. But the most chilling part? Many of the staffers said they had held back out of loyalty to the Queen, to the institution, or out of fear. Only after Meghan publicly painted herself as the victim did they feel compelled to counter that narrative. She said no one asked how she was, one aide said, but none of us were asked how we were either. It became a battle of truths. Meghan's lived experience versus the voices of those who worked directly under her. Who should the public believe? And more importantly, why couldn't both narratives be true? Could Meghan have felt isolated while still creating an unhealthy work environment? The lines were drawn, but the consequences were far from over. Meghan's media strategy was about to clash head-on with palace discretion, and what happened next would shake both worlds. Meghan's Oprah interview. The moment Meghan Markle sat down with Oprah Winfrey, everything changed. It wasn't just a TV interview, it was an earthquake that shook the royal institution. Meghan opened up about her struggles with mental health, her treatment by palace officials, and a chilling claim that an unnamed royal questioned her unborn baby's skin tone. These revelations weren't only raw, they were explosive. Her emotional declaration, "I just didn't want to be alive anymore," put the world on notice. Meghan painted a picture of a palace environment that was cold, distant, and, in her words, dismissive of her pleas for help. Her critics, however, pounced. Some claimed Meghan weaponized victimhood for sympathy. Others pointed to timing, saying it was designed to overshadow royal events. But whatever side you fell on, one thing was clear. This wasn't a story being swept under the palace rug. Oprah's stunned reaction, "Wait, what?" became an iconic meme and symbolized global disbelief. Suddenly, everyone was asking, is the palace really this heartless? Palace insiders were reportedly blindsided. This blindsided the institution, one aide told reporters anonymously. It felt like betrayal. And in that betrayal, lines were drawn. Meghan wasn't just airing grievances, she was rewriting the public narrative. This was her side of the story, unfiltered, unedited, and watched by millions. Her claims triggered a flood of commentary, royal responses, and an irreversible shift in public opinion. And so began what many now call the royal reckoning. Meghan's interview put pressure on Buckingham Palace to respond and forced conversations about mental health, race, and duty. But it also reopened old wounds within the firm and would eventually set the stage for something even more secretive and suspicious. The mysterious palace inquiry. After Meghan's allegations, Buckingham Palace announced it would launch an internal inquiry into claims that she had bullied staff during her time as a working royal. But months passed. Whispers turned into rumors. And eventually, the palace delivered its final decision. The results would remain private. Swept under the royal carpet, critics scoffed. But what was in the report? And why the secrecy? Some royal commentators believe the findings may not have supported the narrative that Meghan was entirely to blame. "They're hiding something," one anonymous source said. If it had completely cleared the palace, they'd have released it. Instead, silence reigned. The report was compiled with testimonies from current and former palace employees. Yet none of it saw the light of day. That decision only deepened suspicions. Was the palace protecting Meghan or protecting itself? One former aide said, "There's too much at stake for them to be honest. It's damage control." This lack of transparency backfired. Rather than clearing the air, it fueled speculation that the palace either mishandled the claims or feared further backlash. It also intensified public mistrust. What were they hiding? Was Meghan really the villain, or had the firm just tried to silence a dissenting voice? Staff speak out. Despite the palace's silence, former staffers decided to speak out. Several approached royal correspondent Valentine Lowe with disturbing stories. One staff member allegedly broke down in tears after working under Meghan. Another claimed they were completely destroyed emotionally. These weren't just minor complaints, these were people describing trauma. According to Lowe, they felt humiliated, they felt bullied. These are heavy words, and their repetition across sources paints a serious picture. One story involved an aide who reportedly fled her role mid-contract, too overwhelmed to continue. The term traumatized appeared again and again in these reports. Supporters of Meghan quickly dismissed these as character assassinations. They argued that her drive and American work ethic were simply misunderstood by the slower-paced palace culture. Meghan herself said, "I will not be bullied into silence," flipping the script and accusing the monarchy of institutional mistreatment. But behind the scenes, aides insisted their stories weren't lies, they were warnings. They said Meghan's charm in public masked a much tougher presence behind closed doors. One anonymous aide concluded, "She knows exactly what she's doing, and she leaves casualties." The secret palace inquiry, buried for a reason. While the bullying allegations stirred headlines, it was the palace's secretive handling of the investigation that raised even more eyebrows. Initially, Buckingham Palace announced a formal inquiry would be launched to examine claims made by Meghan's former staff. However, when the inquiry concluded, the public was stunned. None of the findings were released. Palace insiders say this decision wasn't about transparency, but damage control. They didn't want another war with Harry and Meghan, one source confessed. Officials reportedly believed that releasing the details might further ignite tensions, adding fuel to an already raging fire. Instead, the palace chose silence, hoping the storm would pass. Staff members who participated in the inquiry were left in limbo. Some had risked reputations by speaking out, expecting at least accountability. Instead, they were met with quiet dismissal. The palace's choice to bury the outcome left many wondering what was uncovered and why it was too dangerous to share. Public trust took a hit. Critics called it a cover-up. Supporters claimed it was restraint. But behind the scenes, it painted a picture of an institution unsure how to manage modern crises, especially when they came wrapped in royal titles. As one royal aide put it, the firm wasn't protecting the monarchy, it was protecting itself. The silence surrounding the investigation only added to the palace's image problem. But while one inquiry was being hushed, another kind of damage had already been done, within the royal family itself. Fallout inside the family, relationships in ruins. Beyond the headlines, the greatest casualties of this royal rift have been personal. Prince Harry and Prince William, once famously close, are now distant. The brothers' bond, forged in tragedy and trust, seems shattered. And many believe Meghan's entry into the firm accelerated that unraveling. According to royal biographer Tom Bower, there was no reason for the brothers to drift apart, except Meghan. He believes that what began as distance became a chasm, fueled by private arguments, public interviews, and mounting resentment. William reportedly felt blindsided by Harry's decisions. Harry felt unsupported. It was a recipe for heartbreak. Kate, once hailed as a peacemaker, reportedly tried to mediate. But after her own fallout with Meghan, rumors of tears before the wedding, and tension behind closed doors, her efforts stalled. Family gatherings became strained. Moments that once brought joy were now marked by awkward silences and empty seats. Queen Elizabeth, the matriarch who held the family together, was said to be heartbroken. As one royal aide shared, she saw her grandsons grow up together, lean on each other. Watching them fall apart, it hurt her deeply. While family ties were breaking, so too was the public's perception of the monarchy. And at the center of it all was a growing storm that could no longer be ignored. Team Meghan or Team Monarchy? Across Britain and beyond, the saga sparked passionate debates. Was Meghan a modern woman mistreated by an ancient institution, or a disruptive outsider who refused to adapt? The public split into camps. For every critic calling her a narcissist, there was a defender praising her bravery. Polling showed a sharp divide. In the UK, Meghan's approval ratings plummeted, some as low as 10%. In the US, especially among younger generations, she fared better. Supporters applauded her willingness to speak out, especially on issues of race and mental health. Detractors saw her actions as selfish and attention-seeking. Media coverage played a massive role. Tabloids focused on palace drama, wardrobe choices, and protocol snubs. American outlets leaned into her role as a mother and advocate. One BBC commentator put it simply, This wasn't just a family feud, it was a cultural clash. Ultimately, the public's response reflected broader tensions about race, tradition, power, and change. Meghan became a lightning rod, whether she wanted to be or not. And as the dust settled, many began asking, what does this mean for the monarchy's future? As the headlines slowly faded, one question remained. Where do Harry and Meghan go from here? And can the royal family ever truly recover? A crown at a crossroads. As the dust settles from one of the most dramatic chapters in royal history, the monarchy finds itself at a crossroads. Prince Harry and Meghan Markle are firmly rooted in America, building a new brand far from palace walls. Meanwhile, the crown faces a future shaped by lessons of the past. King Charles must navigate a modern era with fewer royals, more scrutiny, and less tolerance for secrecy. For the monarchy to survive, it needs public trust. And that means facing uncomfortable truths. How they handle future crises will define their legacy. Harry and Meghan continue their work through their foundation, media ventures, and public speaking. But their relationship with the royal family remains fractured. While reconciliation isn't impossible, it seems unlikely without major changes and time. As one royal insider said, the damage isn't just deep, it's personal. And then there's the next generation. Princes George, Charlotte, and Louis will inherit a crown shaped by controversy. Will they embrace tradition or carve out new paths of their own? The world will be watching. So, was Meghan Markle a misunderstood outsider or a ruthless royal disruptor? The truth remains shrouded, but the fallout is undeniable. One thing's for sure, Buckingham will never be the same. What do you believe? Sound off in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe for more royal bombshells coming your way.